Hi, I'm Stephanie Woodward with Disability Details, talking to you about disability rights, access, and life. I am coming to you from this hotel room in Pennsylvania to talk to you about whether or not you should disclose your disability before your job interview. Now, this is a pretty personal question that can only be answered by figuring out some personal details and going through factors that only you can answer for yourself. But I want to talk to you about those factors so that you can make that decision about whether or not you choose to disclose your disability before going in for your first interview. So there are different factors that we're going to go through today, and I hope this will help you make the right decision for you. So before I get into this, I do want to disclose first that yes, I am a lawyer, but no, I am not your lawyer. So everything I want to talk to you about today is not advice from a lawyer, but advice from one crip to another, because yes, I actually have gone through this before. Whenever I do decide to apply for a job, have to make that decision about, am I going to disclose my disability, or am I going to show up and just let them figure it out? Because it's not going to take long for them to figure it out. I have a very visible disability. You may not see it right now, but if I back up, surprise, here I am with my disability. So any employer that interviews me is going to see it very quickly. So I have to also make the decision about whether or not I'm going to disclose my disability before my first job interview. And when we're thinking about these different factors, we're first going to think about the fact that you are under no obligation to disclose your disability if you don't want to. There's no legal requirement that you disclose your disability. There's no moral or ethical requirement that you disclose your disability. If you don't want to disclose your disability, you do not have to disclose your disability. So if you're like me and you have a visible disability, it might come up in the interview because it's gonna be obvious. But if you have an invisible disability and you don't want to disclose it in your interview, and you don't want to disclose it upon your hire date, and if you don't want to disclose it when you're in your job, you do not have to disclose your disability. Now, if you ever need a reasonable accommodation, then you may have to disclose it at a later date, but we can get into that in another video. If you have a visible disability or an obvious disability, or in some way apparent disability, then you do not have to discuss the specifics of your disability, but you may have to discuss how you can perform the essential functions of the job. The essential functions of the job are the things that are required in order for the job to be done. So those are usually the things listed in the job description that the job couldn't be done if you didn't do them. So if the job is being an attorney and it requires you going to court regularly, that might be an essential function. But perhaps checking the mailbox might not be an essential function because there may be someone else who could do that. So think about it in what has to be done by that specific person. That is a good way to think about what is an essential function of a job. That's not the specific legal definition, but again, I'm not here to be your lawyer today. I'm just here to give you some ideas. So, and when you do talk about the essential functions of the job, your disability may or may not come up. So let's say that you come in and you have an apparent physical disability. An employer may ask, hey, an essential function of this job is that you be able to lift 20 pounds because sometimes we have to lift boxes in and out of the office. Would you be able to do that? In that case, you may have to talk about how you would be able to perform that job, and your disability may or may not be a part of that. Perhaps your disability doesn't even play a factor. Maybe you are a person that does not have your left arm, but you can lift 20 pounds just fine with your right arm, and your disability has nothing to do with it. Or perhaps you're a person that has a disability with your back, and you say, I can move 20 pounds, but I would need a reasonable accommodation of using a dolly to move those 20 pounds. So that's how disability can come up in a conversation in a job interview. So you're not under an obligation of getting too deep into the details. So the next thing is that you may want to disclose your disability if you think it would be advantageous to you for that specific field or that specific job. What do I mean by this? If you are applying for a job where you think that having a disability may be helpful to you, then you may want to disclose your disability before the job interview. So for me, I'm an attorney, and I specifically like to work in fields that are related to disability rights, to civil rights, and to serving marginalized populations. So I have a tendency to disclose my disability in my cover letter to potential employers because I think my disability is an asset. I think that my disability helps me to relate to the communities that I am seeking to serve, and I really want to show potential employers that I can relate on a level that perhaps other people cannot relate to. Specifically, if I'm seeking to serve the disability community, I think that I can relate to the disability community in ways that perhaps non-disabled people cannot relate. Other ways that disability may be advantageous: if you're seeking to be a wheelchair salesman and you're a wheelchair user, or a wheelchair salesperson and you're a wheelchair user, then that could be a really good thing to highlight. If you are a deaf person and you are seeking to, say, be a manager of an interpreting service, that could be a fantastic thing to highlight. So think about how perhaps disability could be an asset to the job that you're applying to. If you're applying to a job that is a diversity and inclusion position, perhaps you want to talk about how your disability has helped you to understand diversity and inclusion in another manner. So these are different ways that you can highlight disability as an asset and really make yourself go above and beyond and demonstrate how disability can be a part of diversity, can be a part of how a company can see disability in a completely different light, and really highlight that about yourself. And for people who experience disability pride, this is just a really wonderful way to highlight that through your resume and through your cover letter. If you don't think that having a disability would be advantageous for the position you're applying to, and you're not sure if you want to disclose, then the next thing I would encourage you to think about is, do you need a reasonable accommodation for the interview process or for the job application process? So what you might want to think about is, do you need any accommodation in order to move forward in either applying for the job or interviewing for the job? So you may not even want to disclose your disability until you're accepted for the interview. But let's say you are a person who is blind and right now they only have paper applications for the job. You may want to disclose your disability if you are seeking an electronic application as a reasonable accommodation so that you can fill out the application on your computer rather than filling out a paper application. That is a great reason to ask for a reasonable accommodation and disclose your disability. Or perhaps you've submitted your application and you've been invited for an interview and you're a deaf person. Upon your invitation to an interview, that may be a great time for you to disclose your disability because you need an interpreter, if you do need an interpreter. If you need an interpreter, then you would need to disclose your disability so that the company knows to request the interpreter to be available for your interview. Otherwise, the company wouldn't know and they wouldn't request the interpreter. So those are reasons that you may want to disclose your disability in advance of the job interview. However, if you don't want to disclose your disability, you don't think it would be advantageous to disclose your disability for that specific job, and you don't need a reasonable accommodation in order to apply or in order to interview, then there's no reason for you to disclose, and you may choose to not disclose moving forward. So that's a personal decision and it's up to you, and I hope that this video has helped you consider these different factors. If this video has been helpful to you, then please subscribe for more videos like this and like this video. And if you have a question that you'd like me to answer or a specific topic you'd like me to address, then drop a comment below. I'll see you next time.